As I'm sure many of you know, on Monday, here in Boston, where both I and my wife live, two explosive devices were detonated near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. At least two are dead. One of them, an 8-year-old boy. Over 100 have been wounded and injured. Many have had limbs blown off. Obviously, both me and my wife are fine. We live about 5 miles away from where the explosions were, down near Copley, right down there. But earlier on Monday, the marathon, which is 26 miles long, actually passes by only a few blocks away from our apartment, and we actually went down on Monday and watched the front runners, these amazing athletes, run by, just again a few blocks away from where we live. And that's always fun to do. We did it last year. It's always fun to see the marathon go by, and to see what happened. Obviously, makes me profoundly sad. It's kind of hard to talk about. The truth is, it's going to take days, it's going to take weeks, perhaps even months to find out what exactly happened with the explosions at the marathon. When events like these take place, a lot of false reports go out, a lot of false stuff, a lot of false stories. I've already seen, just as many things debunked as opposed to confirmed at this point. Frankly, a ton of rabid right-wing monsters are online blaming all Muslims, even though we don't know who's responsible. And despite the fact that this attack took place on Patriots Day. Patriots Day is actually the day that Timothy McVeigh chose to blow up the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, the Oklahoma City bombing that took place back in 1995. But I'm not going to go into those reports now. Like I said, it's going to take time for us to really get into what actually took place. But what I'd like to talk about here at the top is how the feelings that were stirred up today obviously bring many people back to 9/11, and myself included. Now, obviously, and thankfully, the casualty numbers that took place here in Boston are much, much smaller today than what took place on 9/11. But I was actually living in Brooklyn, New York on September 11th, 2001. The truth is I could actually see the Twin Towers from the end of my block. Today, just the kind of the haze that you felt after the initial attack, that kind of really did kind of bring me back to that same kind of feeling, that kind of shell-shocked days that you're kind of in, watching all of these news reports roll in. Obviously Twitter didn't exist on 9/11, but kind of watching all these reports, and you don't know whether or not it's true. They're talking about, is this, there might be another explosive device here, things are being evacuated here. You actually, you see, after the thing in Boston, New York and DC had security up. You had Times Square, tons of cop cars in Times Square. They shut down the area in front of the White House. You're bringing back to the the fact that, like, today, on Monday, we were just calling and texting relatives and friends, telling each other that you're okay. After the attack on 9/11 and today, what's kind of inspiring to see is how people do in fact come together. It's inspiring to see how, the first responders and just bystanders down there helping each other out. Heck, in the video of the explosions in Boston, you see people, just heroes, running towards the smoke just seconds after the explosion happens to actually try to help out. But, it was inspiring to see New Yorkers come together after 9/11. I'm sure the people of Boston are going to do the same now. But what I really want to talk about here is the fact that I'm worried. I very much remember after the haze and the shock, all of that took place after 9/11. I very much remember the fear that stuck around, the fear that still engulfed all of us in New York after 9/11. I very much remember that fear. I very much remember, looking back now with a lot of anger, how many people exploited that fear. And I hope, I deeply, deeply hope that that does not happen now after this horrific attack here in Boston. I remember the streets of New York City being lined with soldiers with M16 machine guns. I remember military helicopters and stealth fighter jets and F-16s just zooming overhead. I remember just the feeling of a police state clamping down on New York City. Today very much brought me back to that post-attack hysteria. And I remember the rightful fear and hysteria that we were all feeling. Again, it was exploited. It was exploited by really, really bad, horrible, horrible people. They exploited that fear for money. They exploited that fear for power. They ended up exploiting that fear and lying us into war. They ended up exploiting that fear to justify torture. They ended up exploiting that fear to justify indefinite detentions that still go on to this day. They ended up exploiting that fear to justify all types of Islamophobia towards our fellow man. They ended up exploiting that fear to justify warrantless wiretaps and spying and the passing of the Patriot Act. We are still dealing with the consequences of that exploitation of our fear from 9/11/2001. And I'm very, very worried about that exploitation happening again. I do not want to see that happen again. I do not want to see us go down that path any further. We'll be right back.